three things started to destabilize my entire belief system. First, what's called the design argument finally hit me. I was looking at a wall and how the bricks were arranged, and I thought to myself, you know, if someone told me that these bricks went into this order by some process that didn't involve intelligence, I'd smack them in the mouth. And yet I believe that life formed without intelligence, when the most basic living cell is unimaginably more complicated than some bricks stacked on a wall.
In the 19th century, when Darwin was alive, scientists thought that the basis of life, the cell, was some simple glob of protoplasm, like a little piece of jello or something that was not hard to explain at all. But with the hard work of science in the 20th century, we've seen that the cell is far from simple. It's got very complicated molecular machines and things that are very resistant to Darwinian explanation.
Contained within are living cells, tiny factories of amazing complexity. No scientist has been able to build a synthetic seed, and no seed is simple. Seeds are programmed to remain dormant until water and warmth are available. Who installed this ability to monitor temperature and humidity? Who determined the proper time for the seed to germinate? Who told the root, you must go down, and the stem, you must head upward? Do you see the guiding hand of our all-loving Creator? In order to sprout and thrive, seeds require the proper soil nutrients, the ideal properties found in water, the correct frequency spectrum of light, the right atmosphere, and the necessary pollinators. All of these must have been in place from the beginning in order for seeds to yield a harvest of blessings for mankind.
Now, if evolution is true, then who owns the world? Who makes the rules? How do we determine right from wrong? I've asked people all over the place, how do you tell right from wrong if evolution is true? There simply is no possible way to tell right from wrong. It's a real simple question, but they have no answer. You can't tell right from wrong if evolution is true. If man is God, and this is what evolution means, then man makes the rules and the strongest survive. Might makes right. There's no way to tell right from wrong. I had a professor tell me one time, there are no absolutes. I said, are you absolutely sure? Blew his little brain. Now let me think for just a minute. How can I be absolutely? Yeah, of course they're absolutes.
Through it and you're appalled by some of the stuff.
Ronald Withhager's oldest daughter will be in kindergarten in a few years. He doesn't want her learning the information in this 112-page document. The document covers every sex ed issue under the sun, and it's written for kindergarten through 12th graders.
Masturbation should be done in a private place. That's kindergarten through 3rd grade. You've got to be kidding me. They have no desire to know that. They have no need to know that at that age.
Withhager is part of a group of parents under the impression that these guidelines could be adopted as CCSD's new sex ed curriculum. CCSD's school board trustee Deanna Wright says that's about half of the story.
They put this out so then school districts can pick and choose from this what they want to teach in a curriculum.
After the Supreme Court abolished prayer in public schools in 1962, unwed pregnancy for girls aged 15 to 19 years old have increased by 187%, an astonishing 553% for 10 to 14-year-old girls. This is so insane, it is hard to believe, but it is happening here in America, and Christians are doing nothing about it. If you think your children are not exposed to this deranged thinking, you are terribly wrong.
BDSM stands for bondage and discipline, domination and submission, sadism and masochism. Sadists like to inflict pain, and masochists like to receive. Using a yes, no, maybe chart can be helpful to identify where each of you stands. People sometimes think that those who practice BDSM are emotionally scarred or once abused. Not true. The pain at play with sadomasochism is not like breaking a bone or getting beat up.
Well, Alan, it's Planned Parenthood. They spent about a week in the district teaching freshmen sex education, and that's got some parents really worried about it. They plan to come to a meeting here tonight at the school board, telling the district to kick Planned Parenthood out of the district.
While teaching 10-year-olds the, quote, pleasures of sex. The folks at the International Planned Parenthood Federation apparently think that is a great idea.
So unbelievable, Megan, but this is a very secular, progressive agenda. And I think parents in this country, around the world, should stand up and say, this is our responsibility.
Thanks to all of you at Planned Parenthood for all the work that you are doing for women all across the country and for families all across the country and for men who have enough sense to realize you're helping them all across the country.
In every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
We're going to cover some things tonight about the New World Order. It might be a little scary. Folks, you don't need to get nervous. Either there is a God or there isn't. Both possibilities are frightening. If there's a God, we better find out who he is and find out what he wants and do what he says, because he owns this place. If there is no God, we are in trouble.
Everybody's telling me the world's going to hell. Economically, our nation is $15 trillion in debt. Morally, the family is falling apart. Divorce, teenage pregnancy, teenage suicide, drugs, alcohol. You go down to a local high school, and what was once morally unthinkable, that was shameful, is now not only normal, it's celebrated. Spiritually, we used to be proud of our motto as a country, "In God we trust." Now teachers are afraid they're breaking the law if they say that in school. When I look around and I examine the fruit that's hanging on the tree of this country, it's rotting. And when I dig down and examine the root, I find out it's actually worse than I even thought it was. There is something seriously sick in the soul of our country. If you leave a nation long enough, history tells us that eventually there will rise up some kind of a tyrant, some leader who will enslave his people. Why would America be any different? And to top it off, I have friends in church that tell me that the worse things get, the better it really is, because it means that the end is near and that Jesus is returning. Don't worry that the world's going to hell in a handbasket. Just get out of the handbasket. It's part of the plan, that it's meant to be, that the whole thing is going to burn. Really? Because I have kids in this world. I have friends who have children in this world, and I want a great future for them.
But boy, the devil doesn't like this idea that God created the earth. The devil came to Eve in the Garden of Eden. The first thing he said to the woman, he said, "Eve, hath God said?" Yea, hath God said. He's trying to raise doubts.
If I were the devil, I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, "Do as you please." To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth, I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square, and deify science.
Evolution is a religion. It's something you have to believe in, something you have to take on faith. So they're real big about excluding Christianity. Okay, well, if you really don't want religion, then don't teach evolution. In science class, you can teach the science. Teach the names, like in biology, here's the muscles and the bone, this is the triceps, the biceps, the deltoid, the flexors, the extenders. Well, kid says, teacher, how did they get this way? Oh, we can't talk about that. You just learn what we've got. Learn the facts. It's a fact you have a humerus, a bone in your arm. It is not a fact that it evolved from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. So if they really want religion out of schools, then okay, take the religion out. Take the evolution out.
We like science. We're not against science. But I'm against poison mixed in with the science. That's all. Here's a first grade textbook. I'll show you what I'm talking about. They tell the kids in first grade, Earth has changed much since its formation 4.5 billion years ago. Now just hold on a minute. But if you tell that to a first grader, he's going to believe you. And then tell him again in second grade, since its formation 4.5 billion years ago, Earth has changed. Down at the bottom it says, life too has evolved on Earth. If you add up the dates in the Bible, you're going to get about 6,000, 4,000 BC, not millions. So James Hutton came along and caused people to doubt the Earth was 6,000 years old. Then, his book had a very strong influence on a lawyer from Scotland named Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell wrote a book in 1830, and in his book he developed what we call today the geologic column. Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, and maybe you saw the movie Jurassic Park, named after the Jurassic layer. This whole thing was made up by Charles Lyell in 1830. And the geologic column does not exist any place in the world, except in the textbooks. It's pure imagination. It doesn't exist. But all of evolution theory is based on that dumb geologic column.
And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies, and with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. That what you see on TV is the way to be.
Charles Darwin's argument was that farming, houses, clothes should stop our genes from changing and evolving because we began protecting ourselves from our environments. But John's research shows that the different ways groups of humans chose to live in different parts of the world could actually have driven genetic changes. Just as the climates where different ethnic groups lived varied, so did the rules and habits of their societies, and their DNA was forced to adapt.
If you're a human, you have to survive and deal with other people every day in order to reproduce. And that makes culture your environment.
Genetic adaptations may even have altered the way our brains work. John and his colleagues have discovered around 100 mutations in genes controlling brain chemistry that have taken place since humanity migrated from Africa. One of them, a genetic variant called DRD4, may even have triggered that migration in the first place.
It made people more likely to move.
The DRD4 mutation is most commonly found in populations that live outside of Africa. It appeared around 50,000 years ago. It has been called the migration gene because traits like rapidly shifting focus and quick movements could have been very useful when our ancestors were on the move, even though short attention now appears less useful in our modern sedentary society.
DRD4 is the best example of a gene that is clearly recently selected and has behavioral impacts. It affects the brain in some way. But there are others, and we don't know what they do, but we can say that they're expressed in the brain, they're related to our behavior in some way potentially, but we don't know what those changes are for.
The trait that sets humans apart from all other species is our incredibly complex brain. But could the brains of different races be different? Could they have different intelligences?
Hitler was obsessed with the idea of the survival of the fittest, and Goebbels' propaganda films reflected this obsession. Hitler believed human beings were simply animals, and that the strongest animal would always win. If his subordinates were strong enough, then they would succeed without his help.
Man diese schönen, starken Tiere zum Kampf auf Leben und Tod. Und in ihrem Walde hätten beide so ruhig weiterleben können.
Aber liebes Fräulein Volkmann, ein ruhiges Leben ist doch nirgends in der Natur zu finden.
Aber Herr Professor, es fressen sich doch nicht alle gegenseitig auf.
Wenn auch das nicht gerade. Aber sie leben alle in einem ständigen Kampf. Dabei wird das Schwache vernichtet.
When Darwin's book came out, 1859, of course, that was before our Civil War, racism was rampant in America and in many parts of the world, as it still is today and should not be. But adding the teaching of evolution to the mix just greatly increases the problem of racism. Because obviously, if one race is superior, you got to, okay, which one is it? And the whites think it's them, the Chinese think it's them, the Japanese think it's them, the blacks think it's them. And actually, I don't like the word race. I think there's only one race. There's the human race.
Renowned psychologist Stanley Coren has spent years studying intelligence differences, not among different races of people, but in different breeds of dogs.
Dogs are a marvel of genetic engineering simply because we've kept the breeds separate. You know, my grandparents were Latvia, Lithuania, Russia. But, you know, I take a golden retriever and his granddaddy was a purebred golden retriever and his great-granddaddy was, and so on and so forth. So there's less noise in the genome.
For at least 14,000 years, humans have systematically shaped the evolution of dogs, changing them to fit our needs. Stanley has measured the intelligence of more than 100 breeds.
So we can get dogs which, because of their breeding, differ in terms of their intelligence. If you take a young child below 18 months of age and you put a towel over his head, he thinks that the world has gone away and he sits there. So if Montana has a mental ability beyond an 18-month-old human, Montana should throw the towel off of his head very quickly. You ready, Montana? Go.
Stanley's test results have convinced him that there are big differences in canine intelligence from breed to breed.
Where has the world gone? Okay, what a good dog. And then I've got a beagle, and his job is to amuse my grandchildren. As dog intelligence goes, beagles are 7 from the bottom. So this bench that I'm sitting on right now is more trainable than a beagle. The top dogs in terms of intelligence are the Border Collie, followed by the Poodle. Some people would say, the Poodle, that's a frou-frou dog. No, the Poodle is a retriever, okay? And he didn't ask for that silly haircut.
If some breeds of dogs are smarter than others, why could that not be true for the animals at the other end of the leash? University of Delaware sociologist Linda Gottfredson has been analyzing IQ test scores for the past 2 decades. She claims they reveal a subtle but measurable link between intelligence, genetics, and race. Her interpretation of this data has led her to a controversial notion that the genetic differences between races might lead to differences in the average intelligence of those races.
I guess there would be two rules about human diversity. One is that there's lots of variation within all groups, but there's also a gradation between groups, so that there are recurring and sometimes large average differences between racial ethnic groups. There are differences between racial ethnic groups on the average in IQ. The average white IQ is arbitrarily set at 100. Blacks in the United States and in many other Western countries average 85. Hispanics, the average would be about 80. Native Americans around that level. And then Japanese and Chinese Americans above the white average, and then Ashkenazi Jews probably around 110 and 115.
Evolution is a dangerous philosophy because it's the foundation for racism. The idea that one race of people is superior to another comes from evolution. The origin of species by means of natural selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Favored races? Now, Charlie, that's not politically correct. Oh, it was in 1859 when he wrote the book. We had slavery in America. Darwin thought natives were just advanced animals. Darwin said at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races. Darwin said from the war of nature and famine and death, the most exalted object we're capable of conceiving, the production of higher animals, follows.
Hitler was very strongly motivated by the evolution teaching. He actually had a list he went by that said the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Norwegians were the superior race, and below them were the brown-haired, blue-eyed Germans, and then he had it all the way down to the Jews at the bottom of the list. He thought they were close to pure ape.
Hitler killed the Jews because of his evolution thinking. We fought a really big war. Probably 100 million people died in World War II altogether because of that stupid theory. It's not just dumb, folks, it's dangerous.
Und weil dieser beste Rassenwert der deutschen Nation in einer stolzen Selbsteinschätzung, mutig und kühn die Führung des Reiches und Volkes forderte, hat das Volk sich in immer größerer Zahl.
Since the time he was a boy, he was dominated by this one thinking that one race is superior to another because of evolution. In Hitler's book Mein Kampf, he said, "No more than nature desires the mating of weaker with stronger individuals, even less does she desire the blending of a higher with a lower race." He talked about the mingling of Aryan blood and lower peoples. This is all based on a philosophy called evolution. One race has evolved farther than the rest. Now, who's an Aryan? And what are these lower peoples anyway?
I think it's important to think of individuals in layers. There's the layer we see on the surface, which for many is all that is seen and understood. And for many leaders, that layer is there to overcompensate for what is missing beneath. For Hitler, the magnitude of his weakness psychologically led to a drive psychologically to overcome that, and he developed this compensatory messianic self.
Jungen!
I think you cannot understand Hitler without understanding how evolution ties in and how that fueled the flames in his mind and heart of racial superiority. That's what Hitler was all about.
In a pageant orchestrated by Rosenberg and captured on film, the Nazis celebrated their newly conceived version of Aryan culture and history. Rosenberg wrote, "Today a new mythos is dawning, the mythos of the blood, the belief that the godly essence is to be defended through the blood." Hitler took Rosenberg's idea further when he wrote, "The old beliefs will be brought back to honor again. The whole secret knowledge of nature, of the divine, the demonic. We will wash off the Christian veneer and bring out a religion peculiar to our race."
It was Guido von List's racist writings after 1906 that owed much to the occult revival in Europe. In 1875, List had used the swastika as the centerpiece of a personal pagan rite, and later claimed it was a holy Aryan and German symbol of the old religion. He called for ruthless subjection of all non-Aryans and favored 1932 as a year a divine force would possess the collective consciousness of the German people and usher in the New Age, and the Aryan masters in a hierarchical state eagerly awaited a new messianic leader.
As a symbol for the new religion, Hitler chose the swastika.
The Nazis are putting up signs on Jewish shops, warning people not to buy there. Anybody who resists is beaten up, killed, or taken away to a concentration camp. Everyone around us has gone mad. They were born hating us, raised hating us, and now the veneer of civilization, which had protected us from their hatred, has been stripped away.
The state would have to be more authoritarian and more firmly subservient to the interests of capital. Mussolini and his black shirts were around right after World War I, and for about 3 or 4 years, the big landowners and industrialists used their fascist goon squads, gave them money and gave them arms, and used them as kind of strike breakers, anti-labor militias.
In 1929, Mussolini and the Vatican signed the Lateran Pacts, giving the Church virtually everything it wanted, including its own sovereign state, the Vatican City.
In 1933, communications between the Nazis and the Vatican were welcomed by the Vatican's Secretary of State, Eugenio Cardinal Pacelli, a former papal diplomat to Berlin. During an elaborate ceremony on July the 20th, 1933, a concordant between the Holy See and the German Reich was officially signed and sealed by Vice-Chancellor Franz von Papen and Cardinal Pacelli. Hitler had a dream of a one-world government. Like many other Machiavellian men of past and present times, the Vatican will covertly support anyone whom they think will have a credible chance of unifying the world under one political umbrella, so that the Vatican can force their apostate religion on others. The Guardian reported, as well as other sources, collaboration between the Nazis and the Vatican, helping war criminals escape the end of World War II. Dictator of Spain, General Franco, who championed the causes of Catholicism, fighting communism, using torture and execution to crush enemies or dissenters.
Hitler set up a very horrible antichrist system disguised as a Christian church.
His fellow Nazis were only too happy to embrace the Führer as Germany's Messiah.
It is only on 1 or 2 exceptional points that Christ and Hitler stand comparison. For Hitler is far too big a man to be compared with one so petty. Our Führer is the intermediary between his people and the throne of God. Everything the Führer utters is religion in the highest sense.
And since every religion needs a house of worship, Hitler developed a 30-point plan for the new National Reich Church. It was even published in the New York Times in 1942. Among the rules, no pastors, chaplains, or priests were allowed to speak in church. Only National Reich orators.
Adolf Hitler, 1889 to 1945, Austrian-born German politician and the leader of the Nazi Party. I have learned most of all from the Jesuit order. So far, there has been nothing more imposing on earth than the hierarchical organization of the Catholic Church. A good part of that organization I have transported direct to my own party. The Catholic Church must be held up as an example. I will tell you a secret. I am founding an order. In Himmler, I see our Ignatius de Loyola.
Bear in mind that the National Socialist state is willing and prepared at any time to undertake a clear separation of church and state. In the National Socialist state, everyone is free to find salvation in whichever way they choose. However, the National Socialist state will relentlessly deal with those priests who, instead of serving the Lord, see their mission in propagating derisive comments on our present Reich, its institutions, or its leading men. The fact that the destruction of this state will not be tolerated. The law will prosecute a priest who implicates himself in illegal activities. To destroy the enemies of the state is the duty of the state.
Whenever they lock people up that are outspoken against the regime, they have to do it for a different reason. You know, nobody in China goes to prison for religious persecution. That's really what it is, but they have to give it another name, like meeting in an unauthorized location or something like that, or an unauthorized assembly. So I think there's no question in my mind, and most people's minds, that I'm here for religious persecution. That's not the story they will give. They'll say, oh, it's for taxes or something like that, but I think anyone who really studies the issues will say that that is not it.